This is E&P Reports, a vodcast from Editor and Publisher magazine, the authoritative voice of news media since 1884. Serving newspapers, broadcast, digital, and all forms of news publishing.
And greetings once again, Mike Blinder, publisher of E&P Magazine. Quick housekeeping. If you're listening to this program on a podcast platform, please follow us. Watching on our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button below. Well, don't hit it, tap it, do something, and hit the bell to the right. You'll get an update each and every time we upload this weekly vodcast series we call E&P Reports. I've never met John Ellis, founder of Editor of News Items, but John, your heritage and background precedes you, sir. I mean, you don't look old enough to have this kind of background, or at least not to me. NBC News election unit in the 70s and 80s, contributing columnist to Los Angeles Times and Boston Globe in the 90s, staff columnist at the Boston Globe in 95 and 2000. You know Mike Barnacle? He was on this program recently. Have you ever hobnobbed with him in Boston?
I have. Mike is a friend. Mike and his wife, Ann Finucane, are actually very good friends, and his wife, Ann Finucane, worked with my wife, Susan Smith Ellis, at Hill Holiday Connors Cosmopolis, a sort of leading advertising agency in Boston. So I know Mike well.
Well, if you are a Red Sox fan like him, you have my condolences. That's all.
I gave up on the Red Sox a while ago.
You worked in CNBC in 2000. Here's this. I would just love to interview you as SVP at Fox News Network from 2014 to 2019. But that's not the topic we're going to discuss today. And then editor of news items. That's what we're really here to talk about. Welcome to the program. You're doing some very innovative things, and I want to get your, how should I put this, your perspective on where news media is today and why you're still producing the content you're producing in this very tumultuous ecosystem. So with your permission, we're going to pick your brain, go one-on-one with John Ellis on the backside of this message.
This episode of E&P Reports is exclusively sponsored by Blocks Digital, formerly Town News. Even though the name has changed, their commitment to the media industry is as strong as ever. Blocks Digital is now even better positioned to deliver integrated solutions like content management, audience development, advertising revenue, video management, and more. Join the over 2,000 news publishers worldwide that power their ongoing digital transformation with Blocks Digital, serving over 141 million monthly users who view over 6.5 billion pages of content each year. You can trust Blocks Digital to empower you, to connect you at scale with the community you need to reach. Blocks Digital, formerly Town News, now reimagined to help meet the news publishing challenges of tomorrow and beyond. Learn more at blocksdigital.com.
John, I got some notes from you before this interview, and you have this 4 parts of journalism, which you say reporting, analysis, commentary, and opinion. In your opinion, does that, because we're having major discussions on this platform across all forms of media, what the hell is journalism today? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, sir, this might be a large preamble, but we're in a Madisonian democracy where this document claims that we're supposed to have a free and unfettered press. Thus, government cannot dictate what a journalist is, but they're almost begging us to do that because police forces are trying to figure out who can be in front of the rope line, who can't. We're having trouble now defining who can be compensated potentially by big tech, because, and what is a credible journalist? So you've got it down to 4 simple words, sir?
Well, I think when I started in the business, which was late 70s at the NBC News election unit, most of journalism, I don't know what the percentages are, but 75 to 80% of what we think of as journalism was reporting, right? The story from Afghanistan, the story from California, whatever. And the remainder, was given to analysis. I remember when the New York Times started analysis pieces, and they identified them as such. Commentary, I think of as what you see a lot of in, say, The Economist today, and then opinion, which again, when I started opinion, I think there were 5, there might have been 6 opinion columnists at the New York Times, right?
Right.
Today, it's reversed. Opinion is about 80%. Commentary and analysis is whatever percentage it is. I mean, this is overstated, but if you look at the homepage of, say, the New York Times or the Washington Post, at least half of it is given over to opinion. And that's a reflection of the need no longer having the advertising base that they had in the past, and therefore trying to gin up revenue, get revenue from subscriptions. And what sells is opinion.
Well,
So
we
that's
call
been a
that
big change.
there's so many metaphors out now. They call this the news echo chamber, where certain brands keep talking to a population, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and you can go into the national print brands or those that have heritage in print, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post. They talk to an audience trying to keep them happy by giving them the news that makes them happy. But when you watch CNN now, I'm not saying you do, sir, I'm not claiming, or MSNBC or Fox or wherever your flavor is, most of that's opinion, right? You got a reporter interviewing a reporter. Edward R. Murrow and Fred Friendly wouldn't be too happy about what, would they? I mean, in your opinion?
No, I think in terms of cost cutting, if you think of it in TV terms, there's one thing I say about Fox News, and I think it's true of the other cable news outlets, is that the audience programs the network and not the other way around, right? So the network is providing the audience with what it wants to hear. And that's a major change from when you and I, started in this business.
You've decided to stay in business, do news in your own format. And that's what this is all about now, right? Your whole world is centered around news items. Could you define what this is, when you started it, and what you're doing with news items?
I started it, I had brain seizures in May of 2016. And when I came out of the hospital, I wasn't quite sure if I could think the way I used to think. And so I set about to figure that out. And that's sort of 2, indicators or benchmarks or whatever for, realizing I could think the way I used to think was if I could do the New York Times crossword puzzle the way I'd done it in the past, which was pretty good through Thursday and then harder Friday and Saturday. And if I could organize a newsletter that was helpful to the people I was working with at the time, which was the Fox Business Network and News Corp. And so I started this thing, and what happened, it became apparent to everybody by July of 2016 that Hillary Clinton would win the presidential election. And so I decided to focus on everything else and make that a news brief inside of News Corp and Fox. And it sort of grew from there. And of course, the big moment, I guess, from the sort of growth of news items was that Rupert Murdoch became an avid reader of it. And so therefore, everybody at Fox and News Corp had to become avid readers of it. And that was the beginning of its growth. I did that through 2018. I left Fox in January of 2019, and Rupert said to me, "You can take news items with you." And so the day after I left News Corp,
he let you have it. You didn't have to. You took the brand with you.
Yeah. Yep. I've parted on friendly terms. I mean, it wasn't. It wasn't contentious or anything. And so anyway, I took it, and the next day, actually, after I left Fox, I did it as a Gmail to the 375 or 400 subscribers that I had at that point, none of whom were paying. And I looked to figure out if I could, have a subscription model. And I was introduced to a man named Hamish McKenzie out in Silicon Valley, who had started this thing called Substack.
Yep.
And so in September, October, I can't remember exactly, but in September, October of 2019, I started news items as on the Substack platform. And the group that I brought with me, the subscribers that I had from the Gmail days, were almost all of them subscribed.
Who were you talking to when you moved it to Substack? Who was the base of your audience?
Well, I had the base that I took from News Corp people and Fox people, although the Fox people dropped off pretty quickly. But other journalists that I knew and know from being in the business for a long time, or subscribers. There was sort of leading people in business, academics. It was a good big group from MIT that somehow had fastened onto news items. The Council on Foreign Relations, everyone there subscribed.
Richard's been on this show too. If you're
Richard's a good friend, and so he spread the word. And basically, what happened was there were, what do they call them? There were evangelists for news items, and they spread the word, and people signed up. And
so what's your audience today? How large is your subscription base?
We have right now we have about 4,300 subscribers that are paying, and we have another 18,000 that are free. I'm not quite sure why people subscribe to news items for free, because they get one item a day if they get anything.
They get your lead, and they don't get the rest of the
but they don't get the rest of it.
And how large of the staff are you working with, or is this just you commenting and curating the daily news? What do you?
Well, we went out last year. I decided I wanted to, grow it, and so I went out and raised $1.5 million to enable us to advertise and hire staff. And so now I have a woman named Mary Williams Walsh, who was an award-winning reporter at the New York Times, and she's the managing editor of news items. A young woman named Joanna Thompson, who is a freelance science writer for Quanta magazine, and news scientist, and so on and so forth. And then my brother-in-law, Tom Smith, was a research director at a public relations firm and an advertising agency in his past. He then decided he didn't want to make the commute, and so he quit. He became an Amazon driver, and I called him up and I said, Tom, I need a researcher, and I got to go find one. Can you fill in, and I'll pay you X or whatever? And so he said, sure. And it turns out he was fantastic at it, so we luckily were able to get him on as the research head. Right. So and that's the team.
But you have become almost like, how should I say this? Not that there are people who can actually predict the stock market, but you have been someone who now has established a pretty credible track record of reporting on a story before it gets the oxygen. In other words, you were the first to call an invasion on Ukraine, supposedly. I mean, there may have been another news outlet, but you were on top of it. You predicted the closeness of the 2020 presidential election when the entire world thought the whole thing was going to be a landslide, and you knew this was going to be a real close one. Where are you now politically? In other words, came out of Fox when Chris Stirewalt, he was also on this program, when he left because of telling the truth. And you just said to me between the lines, I got to ask this. Fox, you've lost some of your Fox audience. Where are you at from that environment to today? I mean, are you part of that? I guess what I'm trying to say is, why did you lose that audience, and where were you during that tumultuous time?
Well, the idea of news items is that there are 1,000 newsletters out there. There's, from the New York Times to the Economist, et cetera, and they all have to draw from their own source, right? So if you read a New York Times newsletter, it's all about stories in the New York Times and et cetera, et cetera. The idea of news items was to do a big sweep of 4 topics. Number 1 was a world in disarray, which I stole from Richard Haas.
Richard Haas.
The second was advances in science and technology. The third was politics, both foreign and domestic. And the fourth, which what we call the financialization of everything.
Which covers just the markets and the world and the economy.
Well, the financialization of everything is that the traditional finance, banks and investment banks and so on and so forth, the alternative investing is now arguably the most important work in finance that's going on. So that's the rise of private equity firms, that's the rise of venture capital firms, that's the rise of credit firms, I guess you would call them, people who deal exclusively in debt. There's a whole world of finance that really didn't exist before, and it's enormously powerful. So we cover that pretty extensively.
All right, but politically you're neutral. There's no left versus right.
The idea is that we don't, as much as possible, we want no opinion in news items. And what we're trying to do is take the highest quality reporting about subjects that fall into our 4 categories, organize them into a 10-minute read so that if you get up at 7 o'clock, the news items will be in your inbox at 6:45, and you'll get a news brief that we think is better than most. And that's the basic idea. There are times when we take, quote, opinion columnists and put their commentary or opinion in, but always informed opinion. So like Tom Friedman writing about the Middle East, and you can say, well, he's an opinion columnist, but he's also enormously well informed about what's going on in the Middle East. So someone like Tom is included in news items. We don't, Ray Dalio has a lot of theories about China and debt and so on and so forth. And I suppose you could say he's opinionated, but he also happens to know the markets as well as anybody. So we'd put in something from him.
John Ellis, we have certain guests on this program that have been back so many times, not to sound like Saturday Night Live, that we give you special jackets or something, but you're going to be back. No, because there's so many more ways we can go. And unfortunately, and I'm sure you've read about the demography of today and how anyone under 35 has attention spans that go about 8 minutes, if you're lucky, maybe 4. And my podcasts go to 20 minutes. We've already chatted for over 35, so I'm telling you, it's now there'll be some editing. But I'll tell you this, your perspective on this industry is very valuable. I have read news items, and I am now going, I guess I'm going to give you a little commercial. I suggest you take a look at it, because this is not it's a really good read where you, how should I put this? I think you're respecting people's time. You're giving it to them knowing how valuable someone's time is. And if you really want to get a good analysis, you're going to find it at news items. So I want to thank you for your valuable time. Thank you for being part of the program.
Thank you for having me.
It's our
I
honor.
will.